tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though we part to part, I know, I'll feel even the death you don't cry.
By March 1915, over 1.5 million British men had rushed to sign up. So there was hardly a family that didn't have someone away fighting. Helen Thomas remembered her last evening with her husband, the poet Edward Thomas.
I sit and stare stupidly at his luggage by the wall. He takes out his compass and explains it to me, but I cannot see. Then he takes a book out of his pocket. Shall I read you some? He reads one or two to me. His face is grey and his mouth trembles, but his voice is quiet and steady. And while he reads, his hand falls over my shoulder, and I hold it with mine.
Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are young.
For Helen Thomas, her worst fears were realised when in 1917 she received the telegram telling her that her husband had been killed in action. Vera Brittain was a 21-year-old student at Oxford University. She, like the millions of other women left behind, lived in fear of receiving bad news about her loved ones. Her fiancé Roland was serving at the front. So were her brother Edward and close friend Victor. Vera didn't want to be left out. She wanted to do something useful as well. So she left university to become a nurse.
In a surgical ward, I had told Roland, the nurses hardly occupy the silent-footed gliding role which they always do in storybooks. The mixture of gramophones and people shouting or groaning after an operation relieves you of the necessity of being quiet. They were blaring, blatant gramophones, though the men found them consoling, perhaps because they subdued more sinister noises. They seemed to me to add a strident grotesqueness to the cold, dark evenings of hurry and pain.
Just before Christmas 1915, Vera received some good news. It was a note from Roland saying he'd be home on leave. 2 days later, the phone rang.
Believing that I was at last to hear the voice for which I had been waiting, I dashed joyously into the corridor. But the message was not from Roland. It was not to say that he had arrived home that morning, but to tell me that he had died of wounds on December 23rd. I wondered, however, I was going to get through the weary remainder of life. I was only at the beginning of my 20s. I might have another 40, perhaps even 50 years to live.
Her friend Victor was the next to die. Vera prayed that her brother Edward would survive. But in the final year of the war, he was killed as well. By the end of the war, nearly every family in Britain had lost someone.